So after all this time, I've finally gotten around to reading The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of one of those rings. Now, I wanted to start off this review video with a couple of disclaimers. First, there are going to be some negative parts of this review that are kind of in a similar vein as I did for my Wheel of Time, Eye of the World review. And I just wanted to assure you that I'm not just hating on stuff because it's popular or well-liked. I'm not just trying to be a contrarian or be edgy or hate for hate's sake. I am genuinely trying to give my honest views on these, and I hope that there's some value to be taken away from those views. Second of all, I am very self-aware about what my preferences and tastes are. I am very much a contemporary audience member with very contemporary tastes, so I kind of anticipated going into this book that, the antiquated language, sort of the old tropes of fantasy and maybe some slow pacing might have been a bit difficult for me to get used to, but I also figured it's The Lord of the Rings. Everyone seems to still like it to this day, so there should be at least something in it that I enjoy. So now on into the review itself. I'm kind of going to go about this, I think, in a chronological order, just kind of go from start to finish of the story and just describe what my feelings were, how they changed over the course of the story. The beginning of the story was rather, not great. I know everyone loves the Shire. I liked it too. I think the book did a good job at establishing what the aesthetic of the Shire was, sort of what the feeling, the tone, the mood of that initial starting point of our journey. The only problem was that it dragged on for a long time. It had a very monotonous way of describing it. I felt like we were just kind of spinning our wheels, not really making much progress. I wasn't really that invested in it. I mean, after a point, it just becomes like, okay, I kind of get the idea of where we are, what's going on. Also, the build-up to the call to adventure, I felt like was rather weak because it's literally just Gandalf standing there, just telling Frodo that he needs to do this. And I know that Gandalf is a friend and that he knows a lot about the world, but for the reader, by this point, it's like, this doesn't feel like high stakes. It's just this guy telling us that we need to do this thing, and it really just, wasn't awful. I didn't dislike it. It's just, I felt like it could have carried more weight if it was done in a different way. So yeah, the Shire section, the introduction, just kind of felt drawn out, monotonous, dug around a whole bunch and a bunch of little minutia, like village gossip. What? I maybe a little bit of village gossip would have helped set the atmosphere, but just kind of delving so much into it, I skimmed some parts of it. So yeah, the introductory Shire section, not awful. Would have been nicer if it was shorter though. And for the section between their departure from the Shire and their arrival at Rivendell, things did kind of pick up a bit. We had this new character, Strider, who was, kind of cool. He's showing them the way. We're kind of expanding our scope of what the world is like. But again, kind of slow and bland, I felt like. Even though we're being presented more of the world, it still felt a little bland because it really was just like, Aragorn or Gandalf just pointing off into the distance, like the people of that land by that river, thousands of years, all those ages. I know some people are into made-up lore, but I felt like in the beginning, in the first half at least of this book, it could have been presented in a bit more of a vibrant, interesting way. The one good thing about the first half of this book that I really liked was Tom Bombadil. He's this strange, goofy character who's entertaining to see, but also for the fantasy and world building elements, he actually made me interested briefly in the world building because, he kind of added this sense of mystique and mystery and just like, this extra human depth to the world building that, it's just like, huzzah. He just really had a mystical tone about him. Didn't know who he was. All we knew was that he was old and that he had some great power and great knowledge, and that kind of made me feel the weight of the world building a bit more. So I like that character. I like the time that we spent with him. And then our heroes arrive in Rivendell, which leads to a section that I did not like. It was my least favorite part of this book, and please don't publicly come after me for saying this, but the Council of Elrond was my least favorite part of this book. I know that it's like this iconic moment within the fantasy storytelling world, bringing all of these iconic characters together in an iconic place in Rivendell to set off on this, grand quest, this voyage, but just the Council of Elrond itself, just the way that section was written, was probably the blandest, least interesting, and most incoherent bit of exposition that I have seen in any book or film or story. And the reason I think that is one, the antiquated language of Tolkien that I anticipated but apparently didn't prepare for, but also just the fact that you have all of these different people, like 8+ people, coming together and just trying to share their own stories, their own backstories, their own journeys, their own explanations of what's going on. You've got all these different perspectives being presented in this very muddled, confusing way that just, at least, wasn't confusing, and it wasn't like I couldn't understand it. It's just, I wasn't very interested in it. It was quite, like I said, boring and bland, and it really was just this messy melting pot of exposition. I can't really articulate how exactly it made me feel, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to link to a skit on YouTube that I really like that kind of pokes fun at exposition. Watch this skit, and the way it makes you feel is pretty much how I felt trying to read through the Council of Elrond, because, good gosh. Yeah, kind of messy, didn't really like it. Now, don't dismay, because after this point, things actually started to get good. I actually started to like the story. Kind of the Mines of Moria and onward, I really liked it. I enjoyed it. You had more characters that were making the group more vibrant and alive. There were a lot more quirks and just little dialogue exchanges between them. Just all these colorful character moments that just made me care a bit more, be a bit more interested. And then on the sort of the fantasy world building side of things, I was also more interested. We are in the Mines of Moria. We are in these places. We're actually seeing things with our own eyes. So it made me more vested in the world building. The Mines of Moria in particular were probably my favorite bit of world building because it's just so big and grand and mysterious, and there's also a bit of plot and character elements tied to it because, as we're going through, we see that it's desolate and empty, and then of course Gimli has that very tragic moment of realizing that a bunch of his brethren were slaughtered in their grand home, and that carried emotional weight, and it was rather intriguing. And also in this latter half of the story, it actually felt like a story. It felt like progress was being made. It felt like the writing was focused more on what was happening rather than just solely on what the world was. And I actually cared a bit more about the world in this section. We were seeing more interesting things. The characters were reacting to them in interesting ways. So just the story, the world building, the characters in the last half or third of this book actually carried more weight for me, and I was much more interested in it. And then the ending, of course, with Frodo's, I think, character-defining moment when he decides to go off on his own with Sam, leave the rest of the group behind so that he can deliver the ring himself to Mordor and, try to save his friends, the suffering and hurt. That was a rather cool moment that probably saved my interest in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and is probably the thing that is going to make me come back and read the next book in the series. So in overall, really, really rough start, but then a really, really good final half that kept me into it and will probably bring me back for the second book. So let me know what you think. I'm interested to have a discussion about this. Is my taste part of the degeneration of popular entertainment and literature? It probably isn't, and I would really like to discuss this with you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.